Ms. Kelleher, who was very sad for the year. So she said she can't be here today. Unfortunately, her 8-month-old daughter was diagnosed with COVID as well as her. She's known you since 2017, 11 years for the Committee of Public Services. She is primarily located at the Wareham District Court, and you were as ABA. Your paths crossed on a daily basis. She says she cannot think of a better candidate to be in the District Court Department. As a defense attorney, when I think of who should be on the bench, my first thought is someone who wants to listen to both sides of the story. Ms. Lamarre is that person. She's someone who not only listens, but strives to do the right thing. In all honesty, coming up with the case we work together is who she is, an incredible attorney, worked incredibly hard, quite frankly, without too many. One of my first classes cases, Ms. Lamarre taught me how much compassion she had for people on both sides of the courtroom. It was an incredibly busy day in Wareham. I remember talking to countless defendants in lockup in the courtroom. By the end of the day, everyone was exhausted. There was one final matter to be called. When the clerk called it, Ms. Lamarre asked for a moment to speak with defense counsel. She came up to me and told me that the girl who was about to be arraigned was only 18 years old. She was worried. She was about to be charged with possession of a Class A substance. Ms. Lamarre said she was more worried about the young woman's health than anything. She suggested postponing the arraignment so that I would have time to help out the young woman to get into substance abuse treatment. I remember being astonished. This was the first time in my career as a prosecutor ever such thing was suggested. Ms. Lamarre knew the ramifications of a young girl having a criminal record at 18. She knew the only way to really help the girl was to get her in treatment. In 2018, I approached Ms. Lamarre because I had nowhere else to turn to try to resolve a number of matters with female client. On paper, my client looked like the aggressor. In reality, she had been the victim of serious domestic violence for years. When she finally got the courage to leave her husband, he used the courts and his money to his advantage. I remember approaching Ms. Lamarre and telling her that there was more to this case, to the story than the police reports indicated. She asked me if I would put a memo together, and she would take the file home over the weekend and review it. Monday morning, she approached me in court, sat me down, and talked to me after reviewing the document. She believed this woman belonged on probation and not in jail. I had that case for years before Ms. Lamarre arrived. No one would listen to me what the real story was. Ms. Lamarre did. Ms. Lamarre and I do not always see eye to eye. In a lot of cases, we disagreed about the law, facts, and sentencing. However, I always found her to be respectful and cordial during the discussions, no matter how far apart we were. She always gave me a chance to tell her about my clients. In fact, the first question she would ask is, tell me more about your client and who they are. I recall the first time that she said that to me, and I was taken aback. It was the first time an assistant district attorney asked me that. District court is busy and face fast. No matter how hectic things got, she always took the time to listen and get to the truth of the matter. Ms. Lamarre is a woman of honor, integrity, and compassion. She's going to make a phenomenal justice, and the Commonwealth is lucky to have her. She will listen and ultimately be fair. She will be an amazing addition to the bench and will make the Commonwealth proud. Sincerely, Katie M. Kelleher. And we also received letters that I'm not going to read because they will be in your file forever from the Honorable Shelby Smith, the Regional Administrative Justice down in Plymouth. We received a great letter from the Honorable Ed Sharkansky. All these letters talk about how wonderful you are again, but we want you to walk out of the room later, so we won't read them all. Michael Trainer wrote a letter. He's the father of 2 boys with autism, and talked about an unbelievable experience that he had and how you were the voice of calmness and sanity, and when his kids were at a play and you just took over the entire situation and made them feel like so at ease. And at the end of it all, he just says, she's compassionate, positive, sensitive, and empathetic without pandering or fake. She modeled exemplary behavior and how to treat people, and her daughter followed it. Terry helped create an experience nobody in our family or several other local families will ever forget. We are forever grateful. So those will be in your file.
Thank you.
Anyone here to testify on behalf of Ms. Lamarre? Anyone here who will oppose? Is the door unlocked? All right, we're going to
Witnesses?
we're going to conclude that part of the hearing.
Okay.
And now we're going to hear from you, if you'd like to introduce the people you brought here today.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to introduce my husband, Todd Lamarre, who's been married 25 years. My son, Jack Lamarre, who's graduating from UMass next month. My daughter, Julia Lamarre, who's a junior at Villanova University. Joanna Nunes from the trial court. Jen Smith, Wareham probation officer, and you've met my esteemed speakers.
Thank you. Tell us why you want us to vote for you.
First of all, I want to say that I am incredibly humbled to be sitting here with you today. I, of course, want to thank Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito for the nomination. I also want to thank attorneys Bob Ross, Lauren Green Petrino, and Emily Gauthier for their support. I want to also thank the members of the JNC and the Joint Bar for the work that they do. And of course, I want to thank my speakers, Judge Wright and Judge Domro, for taking the time to speak on my behalf. Lastly, I want to thank my counselor, Joe Ferreira, and all of you for the time you have afforded me this last week, and for the work that you do every day to ensure that only the most qualified candidates are confirmed. I want to share a little bit of my personal life with you because I think it might be helpful in understanding more about who I am. I grew up in Holyoke, Mass., a city that I still have a strong connection to, and a city that I am very proud to have come from. My mom was a nurse, and my dad was a teacher. My parents divorced when I was 10, and my sister Katie was 5. My mom became a single parent raising 2 young girls while working 50 to 60 hours a week. She was, and is by far, the most hardworking, compassionate person I have ever met. Her 8-hour shifts at the hospital were always 10 to 12 hours. She was a nurse supervisor and would never leave until all of her patients and all of her nurses were all set. To this day, at age 83, she's still taking care of people, although unfortunately it is her ailing friends. My dad, who my son is named after, and who we lost in 2014, was my best friend. That saying, he'd give the shirt off of his back to you, epitomizes him. Growing up, we did not have a lot of extra money, but I always remember him giving whatever money we had to people who needed it more than he did. One day when I went to visit him, he was sitting by the kitchen window looking out. He had a big trash bag next to him filled with items. I jokingly asked him if he was running away from home. He told me that earlier in the day, he saw a man come out of the woods near his condo, and he thinks the man might be living in the woods. The Northampton State Hospital was closed in the 80s, and so many people were displaced. So he packed a comforter, clothing, food, and some money in that trash bag and waited for hours for him to come back. He always reminded my sister and I to look for people that needed help and to help them. My parents were tremendous teachers who showed me by example the importance of working hard and being compassionate and empathetic. As a prosecutor, I listened, I showed compassion, and I made sentencing recommendations that reflected that. As a defense attorney, I saw firsthand the struggles, hardships, and disadvantages that my clients suffered. So not only did I work tirelessly for them in the courtroom, but I also tried to help them with other issues, such as finding programs for their addiction or finding jobs. If confirmed, I will bring these incredibly important traits of compassion, empathy, and hard work to the bench. I will also bring to the bench over 28 years of combined experience as a prosecutor, defense attorney, and assistant clerk magistrate. I care deeply about the district court and the people they serve, and would be incredibly honored and humbled to have the opportunity to be able to impact people's lives in an even greater way as an associate justice of the district court. And I thank you very, very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. I do want to say for the record, the first time I met Ms. Lamarre is when Judge Domro encouraged her and came with her to a class that we were in. When I say we, it was Lon Pavich, Sharon Casey, members of the JNC, Judge Domro, and we had a class at UMass Law School on how to become a judge. And you're not the first, but you're one of the people that were in that class, and that was about 6 years ago?
Correct.
6 years ago. So congratulations for getting here. Your resume is astonishing, from working here at the State House to the District Attorney's Office, three District Attorney's offices. You worked at the AG's office, you worked in public schools, you had your own practice, an assistant clerk magistrate, and it goes on and on. So without further ado, I'm going to call on Counselor Bob Jewell to ask
Thank you,
questions.
Mr. Chair. You have 2 wonderful witnesses. You have a wonderful reputation in the court system, and being a very fair and compassionate DA. But the biggest thing for me is you were born in a wonderful city, and anybody born in that city should be a judge in my view.
Thank you.
So I will be voting for you next week,
Thank you so much,
or
Counselor.
2 weeks now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counsel Jewell. Counsel Devaney.
Nice to see you again.
You also.
And you came all that distance. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you took the time to meet with me.
But I did put a guilt trip on
You did.
Okay. what, this is my job, and I was happy to meet with you, and it was great, and it was my pleasure. You applied before.
I did.
Tell me what happened. Did you get to the judicial nominee? Did you
Yes.
get interviewed?
I did.
Yeah.
My name was not on that.
Okay. And that was how long ago?
2019.
Okay. So, tell me about, I was confused when I was asking another nominee. First of all, I want to tell you, you were given instructions to fill out the application, the questionnaire for the Governor's Council. And it states, pursuant to council rules, submit this application no later than 8 days before your hearing. You weren't even appointed 8 days before this hearing. And you had 4 business days. And I met with someone Friday, and I managed to meet with you Monday, and I'm glad I did. But that's what it is. The council voted to have 2, 3, how many they want. I asked for 1. It's not fair to have you waiting or anyone else. And I'm not going to ramble through to get to the 3rd one, and that's what happens. So I just want to tell you that I apologize, because that doesn't go according pursuant to council. You'd have to go back in the future. But anyway, you did it. So one of the cases that we talked about, and it was so horrific, and this is the society we're living in today, unfortunately. So tell us about the 12-year-old twins.
I was appointed, it was a care and protection case. I was appointed to represent the 2 girls. One of the girls was pregnant, and she was pregnant by her mom's boyfriend. So a DCF moved in.
But it was going on, it wasn't just one time.
Correct.
Yeah.
Legal custody went to DCF, but she was still living with the mom. And so I was representing them, so I would go over, to the house. And this is what had happening is the boyfriend lived or slept on the couch downstairs. And one of the girls would come down pretty regularly and have sex with him on that couch. And she became pregnant. And I represented both of them. And when I was talking to the other girl to make sure that nothing else was going on with her and the boyfriend, I noticed that there was something wrong with her. There was such a different effect about her. And I did some research, and horrifically, she had been sexually abused by her biological brother. So these twin girls had just been through so much. And it was difficult in the sense that it's a very small house, and I went there a lot because I was representing them. And there was that couch. And there was nowhere else to sit, but I had to sit on this couch where this horrific crime had occurred.
I know.
And it was difficult. And my heart just broke for what they went through.
So how did it resolve? What was the result of this? She kept the baby.
She had a baby girl, yes, and she kept the baby girl. She attended high school in New Bedford. New Bedford has an amazing program where they can bring their newborns to school with them, and they're cared for while the student goes to class.
I worked at Cambridge, you're in Blackman, and they do that, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, sad case. Now, on your writing about the assault and battery on a pregnant woman, do you want to tell us about that one? That was it seems like that's all you read in the paper. Rape in schools, in 6th graders now, I just read about a teacher to 6th graders. And I don't know what's happening to this whole society. It's, and when babies are missing and who's killing their children. I don't know, there's something going on. I don't know what it is. But tell me about that one.
So in the case that I submitted my writing sample, I actually represented the defendant in that matter, Mr. Craddock, and he was accused of committing assault and battery on his girlfriend, and she was pregnant. Ultimately, the case went through the system, and it was dismissed by the Commonwealth.
Can you tell us in between the beginning and that you just said what was it based on? The
The allegation was they had an argument, he took her phone, he threw her on the bed and kneed her in the stomach, was the allegation.
And so they proved it wasn't true?
No, ultimately, she did not appear for trial, and as my writing example shows, I did a motion and a memorandum to exclude. She did call 911, and the government wanted to use that 911 phone call in evidence, and it was not an excited utterance, so they weren't allowed to do that.
And you know, you have cases where, you know, one of the cases, the girl was raped, and then she wouldn't go forward with it. That's hard for you, isn't it, huh?
It is hard. On that particular case that I think you're talking about, she was 16, the defendant was also 16, and the defendant allegedly went to her house. They had been texting back and forth, and then he threw her on the bed and raped her for the allegations.
And she had all the evidence from the hospital and everything, but then she did want to go further.
No, I think she was afraid and her family was afraid, and she had been through obviously a tremendous amount of trauma, and I think that they were concerned that going through the criminal justice system might impose more trauma on her. So they made that decision, which of course I respected.
What was the most rewarding case that you've had when you look back in your years?
I've had so many, and I've been so blessed. I think one of them was probably the one that I wrote about with Diane Porter, only because there were so many victims. There were close to 100 victims, but we lost some. They just had moved or we could not find them.
Yeah.
So we had 92 or 93 victims. Women and men that worked and cared for elderly people and disabled people, and this woman refused to pay them. Yet they continued to work because they were afraid that these people won't get their medicine or have food or anything. And they faced a tremendous financial loss. I mean, they couldn't pay their bills, they couldn't pay for their car, for their apartments, but they continued to work. And so getting restitution for that amount of people was really rewarding.
Wow, that must have been a big settlement, huh?
It was in Superior Court. It was one of the few cases that I indicted in my time with the Attorney General's office. Most of them are handled civilly, but this one was criminally, and we indicted Ms. Porter.
So how did they do that? They make up the lost wages, or?
So and that's what took so long. So many victims, we went through boxes and boxes of records, work records, to determine how much money that they were owed, and that's how we determined the amount of restitution.
Right. So you've been involved in tax liens too, right?
I have, yes.
Yeah, and there was a tax lien, you want to talk about that? That was, the woman was talking about that her husband was working at Nike.
That was my case, yes.
Yeah.
That's my, yes, that's what happened to us.
Yeah.
We fell behind on the
Right,
taxes.
I know, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'm a little tired.
No, I understand.
You know, I've been sick, so it's been crazy. So, yeah, so that, how does that happen? You can just represent yourself and that's how you do it?
There was no representation. You didn't have to go to court.
You didn't have to?
No,
Okay,
no.
then that's great, that's great. Now, how did you decide to go into this type of law? Is it something that you know, I mean, there's juvenile and there's all kinds of things, you know?
Oh, that's a great question. My last year in law school, I did an internship for Bill Bennett in Springfield. He was the newly elected district attorney, and I did an internship, and I just fell in love with doing trials. I loved it.
Really? Yeah. No, everyone that I've ever met always says the district court is the people's court.
Yes.
And they love it. And Judge Pomerol wouldn't leave it. He just loves it. And then we had someone recently to Superior Court. She wouldn't consider anything but Superior Court. She wanted community. So that's that's your philosophy, So it's good to put the people in the right place.
Absolutely.
And
as you see, I've been in the district courts for so long. I love it. I love being there.
Yeah, that's really good. So, and I read about this, about the woman who's tested for opiates, the time of her daughter's birth. I don't know how, I have a friend, and his girlfriend wouldn't stop drinking. She drank out to the pregnancy. So the baby's born with that syndrome, small head, small for his age. He's adorable, but, you know, he has a long way to go with this baby. And he's a wonderful father. And it just breaks my heart. And I know it sounds crazy, probably, but I just think there should be a law that if a woman does that, and she's living his life that way, boy, really, because he's not like a fulfilling life, that they should be prosecuted. They should, because to me, it's an assault. It is wrong, but it's not. They don't consider that because they're probably not even considered a baby. I don't know what it is, but it just seems to me. And I read about it, and they said that alcohol goes into the bloodstream and has worse effect than drugs. I was shocked at that. I really was. I didn't know that. But I've seen him. I've seen this little boy, and my heart breaks. And he's doing everything for him, you know, getting all of the, you know, the things that he needs to exercise and his mind go. So in that case, what would happen with the one with the opiates?
So DCI came and they took the baby away and placed the baby in foster care. And we had court proceedings and hearings, and eventually she was able to stop using drugs, and she was clean for a substantial amount of time, and she was working. The child was fine. That you know, we knew what that early age. We don't know. Yeah, we don't know long-term the effects of it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, she gained custody back of her daughter. She worked so hard. There were relapses, of course, but she picked herself back up and she tried, and she was very successful.
So, what out of all your cases, what is one that'll always be in your mind to say, yeah, that was a good one, and I'm glad that's the way it turned out? Is there any one that stands out? Maybe
There's-
more.
Yeah, there's been so many, and you know, you know, many that I wrote about at my recent ones.
Also, there'll be a couple more minutes, okay, if you want to.
Pardon me?
You have 2 more minutes if you want to focus on anything else.
I'm sorry.
You have 2 more minutes for your 15 minutes. I'm just giving you
We're on a
the-
timer.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, 7-1, they voted a timer, so you can't talk more than 15 minutes. And I'm sure the federal judge that they just voted for talked more than 15 minutes, because I heard her. But this is ram in, ram out, and I apologize because it's not fair to you. But I'm the one, it was 7-1, and so that's it. I also made a motion that we only have one hearing. That was 7-1 also, too. So I really am in favor of having a nominee to talk about themselves, because this is the first time in all your process coming here that you're going to talk publicly about yourself. And I'm sorry that they did that, but, you know.
Actually, the nominee can talk as much
I'm
as
the
she wants.
tuxedo with brown shoes.
Just to be clear, the nominee can talk as long as she wants.
What
We're
is it?
limited to 15 minutes. She can talk as long as she wants. We're limited to 15
No,
minutes.
it isn't. The thing that they voted on was 15 minutes total of the council
It's not the-
and the nominee.
All right.
Total 15 minutes. That was the vote.
Okay. All right, then, Councilor Duff, you're next. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think that the question of, you know, I've worked with addicted people. You know, no one decides to become an addict on purpose, right?
No, they don't.
And I'm really disturbed from what I just heard of anyone even suggesting that a woman addict be held responsible for their
Oh, I
addiction
didn't say
when they
addict, I
become
said
pregnant
alcoholic.
because someone impregnated them. So both parties would be equally responsible for that fetus. That was literally disturbing to me and mind-boggling that anyone could actually have that conception, no pun intended. But have you experienced, and I'm sure you do have some working, particularly in the work you've done, what's your interaction with people who are addicted in the courts? Have you had a lot?
Yes,
I'm assuming yes,
no,
but...
no. I've had a lot of interactions from victims that are, and from my clients, defendants,
Right.
that have had substance abuse problems, and a lot of my clients have substance abuse problems and mental health problems.
Correct. I shouldn't assume. I come to the same conclusion. And do you believe that alcoholism is an addiction?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's the same as being, if you're an alcoholic, it's really the same as being an opiate addict.
Yes, I think
It is.
alcohol is a drug.
It is a drug. Well, we know it's a drug,
I
right?
often say drugs and alcohol, but
It's-
I think alcohol is a drug.
It's was always, in the history, was considered medicinal. But to not think alcohol is addictive and that an alcoholic isn't an addict. And if someone engages in a relationship with somebody they know is an addict and then create a new life, they are both equally responsible for that. In my opinion, I don't make the laws, but to suggest otherwise is quite disturbing. How about, and I've read that you've had some interaction with special needs people,
Yes.
and that I think is very important because, as you know from your work and in the work in the courts, often we don't always recognize people who have some different developmental disabilities. I tell people I had a sister with Down syndrome. It was apparent if you saw her, there was a disability, but there are other folks who may have other issues, and we need to be mindful of that. I think the chiefs in the courts have done a tremendous job with their education on this. And so that was very heartwarming to me to see, the letter that was written from the family. It's important. And then how about the LGBTQ community? Have you had many cases with gay, lesbian, transgender people or children?
Not a lot. I did have a defendant in the dock probably about a year ago. It was a series of armed robberies, and the defendant identified as a female. So I grabbed the defense attorney, Mike Bergeron, and we called the facility to see where the defendant would go, and she would go where she identifies
Right.
to, which was great. But we also wanted to make sure that she was going to be safe there. So we worked on that together. That's really my only one that I've had direct interaction with.
But and it's not a trick question. I mean, it is what it is. And I, from what I know, I would say those were all the right things to do, because regardless of what we believe as individuals or feel or our personal opinions, we're charged with something bigger, and ultimately that is the safety of the person in custody, right? And that's a dangerous situation. My concern as a member of that community is that there are folks out there, particularly younger people, who are homeless and get themselves into lives of crime because they feel safer living on the streets than they do at home or in a foster home. That's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking in the United States. More heartbreaking in Massachusetts, where I am very proud to be a citizen and think we strive to do our best, and we're pretty good. But we all, as adults, as officers of the court, which we all are charged with something a little bit higher. And we're held to a higher standard, and in my opinion, we should be. So I thank you for that. And again, I think the chiefs are doing a great job on as much education as they can. So people understand, because, it's not, despite the fact that a lot of folks don't understand it, and I get it, especially the transgender, big issue to get your head around. But it's a real thing. And if you've ever met a transgender child, it's really can be quite shaping and different. It's a very different thing. It's really something. And again, it's not a choice. No one would make that choice, and no parent would make, you want your kids to be safe. But anyway, thank you for your answers. We talked. I feel very confident with you. I gave you some tough questions when we spoke. Really I'm concerned about, I don't want to hear all the nitty-gritty details of horrific crimes. I'm not here, this is not CSI for me or Dateline or something. I'm more interested in knowing, what quantifies you to make your decisions and you as a person. My background is public policy, so I like to look at these things more from that perspective. And although, you're not the profile that I may have picked out, You're certainly qualified, and I think you appear and have presented yourself as to be open to learning and expansion and everything. And there really isn't much more we can ask for. So thank you for your application. I think you will, hopefully, you may be elevated and you will have much to contribute to our court system. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council Kennedy.
I've seen you in court.
Yes.
You do a great job. You are very compassionate, very professional in terms of the way you deal with the lawyers and the litigants. You are going to make a great district court judge. I spoke with you at length on the phone one day about, in court one day about what kind of judge you'd be. You certainly satisfied me, and in 2 weeks I'll be voting for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Counselor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor DePaul.
Thank you, Counselor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm curious about a couple things. On your career path, you ended up in New Bedford Public Schools.
I did.
Is that accurate? And that was in between, you had worked in juvenile court, but then you had been in the Fair Labor Division.
Correct.
So how did you end up in New Bedford?
I received a call from a friend of mine, and there was an opening for a position in New Bedford Juvenile Court. It was a liaison position from the court to New Bedford Public Schools. And I thought about it, and education and kids are my passion, so I said, all right, I'll apply for the job. I did not get the job, but the panel called me back in, and they said, would you be interested in working? We don't have something specific for you, but we're working on a lot of different projects, and we think you'd be great, and then we can morph something more concrete down the line. So I said, sure. At that time, they were really focusing on attendance issues. New Bedford at that time's dropout rate was 3 times the state's. So there was a big push for attendance. So I worked on that particular project. And
So how did you work on that? What kind of
Sure.
initiatives? Did you have success in reducing the dropout rate?
we did.
And what kind of factors did you think played into that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
What initiatives played into that?
So what we did was really try to educate both the students and the parents about the effects of being absent. A child that's chronically absent is defined as only 15 days a year. So what is that, like 1.5 days a month? Is less likely, if they're chronically absent in kindergarten, they're less likely to be able to read by 3rd grade, and I guess by 5th grade, the scores are well below where they should be. And actually, 9th grade attendance is really the predictor of graduation. So it was a big, big push.
And does that play into the folks you would see as a district court judge? I mean, is that a continuum?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So we did a major push in educating kids through fun activities, like, if their class had attendance that was really great, they got pizza parties. I did a lot with the high school.
What were some of the underlying causes of the truancy or the lack of attendance that you saw?
Some were just educating, and sometimes it's cultural.
Like
the
cultural
Latino,
differences?
the Latino population sometimes thinks that they want to spend time, and it's a good thing to keep them home.
Yeah.
And so we did education.
Was discipline playing a role in those numbers when you got to New Bedford?
In what numbers? The
dropout rates, because we know there's a very strong correlation
Yes.
and probably causation between discipline that happens in schools and the kids who are more likely to drop out.
Sure.
Yeah. Were there trends happening in New Bedford that you knew about when you got there?
I can't say for sure,
Okay.
but I'm sure it's a factor.
Yeah, I mean, only a couple, are you familiar with Chapter 222? Possibly not. So you were in New Bedford from 2012 to 2013. So right after you left in 2014, Chapter 222 was approved. So and it dealt, the thing I want to focus on is emergency removals was a tool. So the law was a response to the fact that we were disciplining too many kids, and that was leading to dropout rates. And so the goal was to reduce discipline in the schools, exclusionary discipline, right? So I'm wondering, is that a phenomenon? Did you see a lot of exclusionary discipline in New Bedford?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you think about it?
Well, we tried to not to do that, to educate them in different settings so that they wouldn't be excluded, but they're excluded from
Is
their
it the
normal.
students or the school district?
The school district.
Okay. And what kinds of what initiatives did they take to reduce that?
I really wasn't involved in that aspect of it.
Okay.
my focus was on the education for the parents and the children and students. And I was only there for a short period of time. There was a major deficit in the school department and like 200 people were laid off.
Okay. And you've worked in juvenile court. You've worked with kids who've experienced trauma, including sexual abuse. We heard about that. So you probably know that people who've experienced sexual abuse or domestic abuse, it can be traumatizing even to have to listen week after week to descriptions of sexual assault, physical abuse, childhood abuse. It's tough.
Sure.
Would you say so?
Absolutely.
For someone who's dealt with that?
Absolutely.
I agree completely. I have no further questions right now. My big concern in general is a balance on the bench between prosecutorial and defense
Yes.
experience. I wanted to come here and be assuaged about your perspective and that I could feel comfortable in your predominantly prosecutorial experience, not exclusively. And I do feel good about that. So I appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Counselor. I appreciate that.
Thank you. So now it's my turn.
Uh-oh.
I move we adjourn.
Julie, Jack, you guys have any input on this?
Your time's up.
No?
I mean, my mother's the most incredible and compassionate person I know. She's my best friend. She's the first person I call with advice to talk about a bad day. She's so intelligent. I got it from her, not Clemmy.
Oh, cool. You're grounded. Take the car away.
But I can't think of a more hardworking, and I've seen her. She gets home from work at 5 o'clock and works on our cases till she goes to bed and wakes up at 5 a.m. to prepare. She's so hardworking and intelligent, and I couldn't think of anyone more deserving.
It's awesome for any parent to hear from their children, and that's a great way to conclude this hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor.